A little more than 10 years ago, it was clear that climate change was coming, and South Africa wanted to figure out, what did it mean, and also what it could do about it. At the time, it wasn't clear 100% what the impacts would be on the South African economy, what would be the big channels of impact, how all these things would fit together. It's also clear that, climate change it's a relative thing. Some things will be affected negatively. Some things might actually be positively boosted. And we have to take all of these things into account. And it's a global thing. So there's a whole series of really complex considerations, some of which we were really able to go into in the LTAS program, became a report that really then went to the Planning Commission.
Now, our section dealt a lot with the economic impact of climate change. And in that, we used an integrated set of different types of models. And these range from climate models, which give us a sense of what's happening to temperature and evaporation and rainfall. But these needed to be translated into potential economic effects. And one can't really do that with just raw information about how hot it's going to be. So we needed to pass that information over into a bunch of different other models, including what could happen to different crops, what could happen to the state of roads, what could happen to water availability. And from those, we now start getting to, well, what's the potential economic impact going to be? Because now that you have some information about how the climate is going to affect the productivity of crops, these can then translate into some rands and cents. And we can figure out, this is the potential of climate change to influence different agricultural crops. What happens to water supply? What happens to energy availability, particularly on the hydropower side? And also, what happens to the longevity of roads. And this is important because policymakers do need to get a sense of, if you are building a road, knowing something about how durable it is and how vulnerable it is to increased temperatures or flooding or sea level rise is an important way of getting that impact. Now, we've taken these four channels, and put them into an economic model, because what you ideally want to see is how these impacts interact together. So, for example, if you have a lot of rain, this might be detrimental to roads because flooding is going to cause a lot of potholes. But on the agricultural side, you do have additional water, and that might be conducive to increased crop yields. So you do want to get a sense of what's happening simultaneously across different transmission channels. And this is one way in which we did that.
So there were a number of things that came out of the LTAS program, all of which were really quite important. So one of the things that we were able to show to the Planning Commission is that the impacts aggregate for South Africa by the time you get to 2050 weren't going to be potentially as large as they were worried about. So, you would have one group showing up saying, oh, well, South Africa is going to be drier, and, you need to prepare for a drier future. And then another group showing up saying, oh, actually, our model says it's going to be wetter, and you need to worry about flooding. And I think the innovation within LTAS was, it's all of the above. Climate change is uncertain. It's inherently uncertain. The models themselves are what's called chaotic. So they will end in different places. And rainfall is a particularly uncertain element. So we really brought, actually, they're, based on the best available information, we think the chances are that, in the aggregate, you're going to get this kind of an outcome. But the bigger issue was you're going to get different outcomes across different regions. Could be wetter, could be drier. You need to choose robust solutions.
The LTAS report identifies South Africa's highly integrated network of water infrastructure. So these include dams and interbasin transfers as a source of resilience to climate change, particularly larger ones that connect major urban and industrial centers to the sources of water. So importantly, these systems need to be well maintained in order to serve the communities and to serve the economic activities that depend on them. Unfortunately, around 40% of water supply in South Africa is lost before it can reach billable users, caused in some part to poorly maintained infrastructure. And this is an ongoing an issue and one that government recognizes is important to fix. There have been calls for a comprehensive strategy for investing in water resource development, bulk water supply, and wastewater management. The Department of Water and Sanitation has looked at different coordination options, including the establishment of a water regulator and expanding the mandates of different water management entities. Some of the other strategies, including by the National Treasury, sees a role for expanding access to water for irrigated agriculture. And in order to be able to do this, to increase export growth in labor-intensive activities such as the export of fruit, one does need to have a very good management system, particularly on the infrastructure and distribution of water. Operation Vulindlela is a government-wide program of action that focuses on how South Africa implements high-impact reforms, particularly in network industries. So it's not just water. These things include efforts to stabilize electricity supply, reduce the cost and increase the quality of digital communications and broadband, but also to ensure that water supply is sustainable to meet demand. So as it pertains to water, these include things like improving water use licenses, having that independent water regulator, finalizing water pricing strategies, and to address a lot of the institutional inefficiencies that result in low revenue collection and increased water losses. Now, IFPRI's impact in this has been particularly on providing some of the evidence base as to why water is important in unlocking growth. So by providing the evidence base, IFPRI's been able to influence that policymakers are able to take these long-term issues into account, especially as they have to prioritize them with short-term priorities.